morning MMO community. Welcome to Nomade Gaming and the first video I ever make. Yes, it's gonna be crappy and really cheap production value, but that cannot be said for the content and game I'll be covering in the coming weeks and years until we eventually get the release. I am here to tell you about a game called Ashes of Creation, and I am super excited about this game. It's going to be the savior of the MMO genre, and our messiah, our absolute messiah, at least I hope so, is Stephen Sheriff. All the barely contained hype aside, let's be a bit more realistic. Today I'll be covering what exactly is Ashes of Creation. Yes, it's an MMORPG, but what are we looking at? Is it free to play? Oh heavens no. Is it buy to play? Is it action combat? What is it? But first, let's take a look at the teaser trailer that was released in, I think it was 2018. Here we go. Damn, I let that one linger a little bit longer right there at the end just to appreciate the amazing music score coming in there. I don't quite know who the composer is, but I'll get to that probably soon. Right, so what is Ashes of Creation? Let's start with a little bit of background, shall we? First of all, Stephen walks into a bar. Bunch of friends, some developers, some investors, some publishers, pretty much everyone from the gaming industry is around. He says, why don't we make a game? That is literally the start of Ashes of Creation. Stephen wants to make an MMO that he wants to play, and the philosophies and design decisions going into this game is pretty much exactly what the gaming community of MMORPGs have been asking for, begging for several years. And that is what makes this game exciting. His passion in the interviews and the various content already put out by the studio makes this game sound like it is almost too good to be true. We'll see, I guess. For now, I am incredibly hopeful. Ashes of Creation is an upcoming subscription-based MMORPG being developed by a veteran MMO player that is dissatisfied with the current MMO market. He started up this project with his own investment and has since gained over $3 million in additional crowdfunding. This will be the first MMO to release in years, probably even a decade, that I would consider a true PvX MMO. There is a reason to PvP, a reason to PvE, and many reasons to cooperate with other players. The very essence of a massive multiplayer online game is making a return. We as players arrive on Vera through a divine gate and are tasked with resettling the world. a world with established and rich lore after the sentient races abandoned it millennia before the game's timeline even starts. As we go into the world, the areas are divided into small nodes that we first are not aware of. And as we actually work on these nodes and collect resources, killing mobs, and other almost survival-like MMO aspects, these areas, these nodes, start to grow, at first becoming a camp. That camp gets upgraded into a village, a town, a city, and eventually a metropolis is born. What this means is that even every player contributes to an area, contributes to a node, and gets invested in it. This investment is what drives the PvE in Ashes of Creation. Dungeons, world bosses, events, quests, timelines, all kinds of things will unlock based on player interaction with the world. This means that every node, every server will be different. Experience will differ based on the interaction of these players with the world around them. Now I'm sure your next question is whether this makes sense in the long run. What are you going to do when your node maxes out? What are you going to do when you're essentially just got metropolises all over the place with hyper-developed areas? Well, guess what? Every single node will share a cap within an area so that you cannot do that. Nodes will be directly competing for the capability to upgrade to this extent. And this is where the fuel for PvP comes from. Nodes will need to be sieged and attacked to make room for your own node to grow and prosper. This sounds like a very fun reason and mode to be PvPing in, and we're expected to see 250 versus 250 people for larger sieges. Other PvP modes will also exist. To name a few, Guild vs Guild, Open World PvP, Caravan, attacking and protecting, arenas, which will even be able to give you gear. These arenas will be 1, 3, 5, or even 20-man teams, or deathmatch games with a laggard ranking. The ever-controversial World PvP is going to be interesting, but the Ashes team plans to implement an anti-griefing flagging system to discourage repeat PKs. Attacking a player will mark you as a combatant. If that player attacks you back, he will be marked as a combatant in return, and normal PvP ensues. If the attacked player does not attack back, the attacking player will accrue corruption, which will both reduce his rewards and eventually, with enough kills, will lose combat stats. With real penalties being in place for the dying PK player, it's very likely to be punishing for this kind of behavior over a long period of time. They could potentially lose gear or even resources on their characters. You could even play as a bounty hunter and hunt down these corrupted PK players without penalty to yourself or being added as a flagged combatant for rewards from these PKs. That brings me to the different classes. Classes seem to be quite extensive, with a main class that cannot be changed and a subclass that supposedly significantly changes the way the main class is played. Picking a mage and making your subclass a fighter, for example, will turn you into a battle mage, which sounds pretty badass. Other classes include your standard archetypical summoners, rangers, fighters, bards. As far as races are concerned, there seems to be 5 core races with a few sub-races below that, so I'm not entirely sure how that works. The wiki does have some information on it with a lot of little text around it, so it's actually an interesting read, but I don't know how that might affect your stats or how your character plays or profession-specific skills to a specific race. So we'll see how that turns out. The list almost seems a bit too ambitious. I sincerely hope they can balance all these options out and actually make them meaningful at the same time. It'll be a tough task, and I can't imagine how they would actually go about doing it. As for how these classes and the combat in general will play, it seems to be a tab, target, and action combat hybrid with a skill distribution of 75% maximum per build. That's a limitation set by the game. I would expect healers and mages to have either more tab targeted or AoE related skills, and melee classes to be more action combat based. Ashes will be adhering to the tried and trusted trinity of tank, healer, and DPS roles. I quite like this decision as it allows the devs to make meaningful group endgame content in general. Since PvE encounters in general, being they dungeons, events, or world bosses, will spawn based on player interaction, I can imagine the game having a lot of long-term playability because of it. You're essentially going to want to go and destroy or upgrade another node so that you can progress a node somewhere else or travel across the world to experience content found in other regions of the world. There won't be any fast travel, so moving around will be a real risk since PvP in the open world is still a real thing. This might be a risk with tating simply because of the crafting necessary, the resources necessary, and the increased income you can gain from these areas. Players will only be able to master a single crafting or gathering artisan profession, meaning you're really motivated to go and cooperate with other players to progress your gear, housing, the settlement or town or node that you're in. And since crafting can provide you with the maximum tier of gear in the game, you really are motivated to build a community, to speak to your neighbors, so to speak. And I really expect this game to be an extreme social experience. However, this means that Stephen wants us to communicate directly, to form guilds, to use not UI to conveniently group up. So don't expect a dungeon finder or looking for group tool of any kind in this game. Additional social elements are pretty expansive actually. We can essentially become a mayor or owner or government of a town. How this would work, town as a node. How this would work is that you'd essentially become or settle the place and decide on a type of government you would like to run. Be it a military one where you would need to do a one-on-one combat tournament to decide who becomes the leader, or a voting system, or there are 4 different ones that you can actually choose from. Becoming the leader of a town even gives you a unique flying mount to aid in sieges and moving around your territory. As far as story, lore, and other fluff goes, the game is said to have a myriad of different religions, although it's really more considered a single religion with offshoots here and there that differently interact with each other. You'll have a personal story that you yourself will be following through that is probably not tied to any sort of region itself. A cultural quest line, which I assume is more tied to your race rather than the core story itself. And finally, regional quest lines, which I can only assume is going to be affected by the world itself and how it progresses. An interesting mechanic that they're adding is if a guild of, let's say, 20 dwarves decides to move into a node and they primarily contribute to it, that node will basically get dwarven style to it. Dwarven architecture, dwarven style weaponry, dwarven art. It'll be so cool to settle a city and actually have it have character based on the people that live there. Ashes will be a subscription-based MMO at $15 a month, but you won't require an initial boxed version purchase to start playing. A cosmetic microtransaction store will also be present, and this is a little bit controversial for a subscription-based MMO, but if the transactions or microtransactions are fair and allows for a few unique skins for, let's say, the price of a coffee, I have no problem with this model, as long as the updates and content releases for the game itself are acceptable quality and earnable in-game to a decent extent. A very big concern for me about microtransactions is that a lot of these games create a problem, like for example, bag space problems or storage issues if you don't spend real world money. I don't want to see it in this game. You cannot create a problem and then try to solve it, or with the only solution rather being the purchase of these convenience in big brackets. Now you might be wondering why I haven't mentioned pay to winners yet. Well, that's because Steven has already really adamantly confirmed that there will be no pay to win elements in this game. No XP skips, no end game gear purchases, nothing along those lines. So that's a really big positive. Now, a release date has obviously not been confirmed yet. We are at least 2 years out from a release date, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. At the end of the day, all we want is an incredibly good game. If If we get it in 2022, 2023, who cares, as long as the game releases in a amazing state. The good news as well is that the game will be receiving continuous updates, with Steven already confirming that there are plans for post-release releases. Whether this is story, additional zones, or anything along those lines is a bit unclear at this stage, but nonetheless we can expect the game to see regular support and updates, which obviously is what you need from an MMO. As I said at the start of this video, I'll be covering this game as we get new information and the development process continues, so expect way more videos from me coming in the future. I'll also be doing a few live streams and stuff as the time progresses. At the moment, you can actually help back the game. For the price of $75, you can gain access to the beta weekends, or $250, which admittedly is a bit steep. You can gain access to Alpha Test 2. You are no longer able to access the Alpha Test 1. The people that were early backers will have access to that, which is a bit of a shame since I will be missing out on that as well. Now, it's worth noting that all of these packages actually contain subscription time for when the game releases. So this price might seem a bit ridiculous, but you do actually get quite a bit of value out of it. You also obviously get the unique rewards that come with it in a form of cosmetics anyway. Well, that about wraps it up for my first video ever. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I will be creating a Discord and putting it in the description. I'll be covering the AMA that will be happening on Saturday, or has happened depending on when I upload this video, in the next video, so expect that soon as well. Cheers guys, have a good one, and may this be an amazing game.